And that's the thing that you've got to get right first. And if you see where Airbnb is shifting, it's more to the experiential, like design, the amenities. You're curating an actual experience for your guests, your potential guests that you're going to be hosting. And that simultaneously allows your property to stand out against competitors.
Hi, I'm Wyatt. And I'm Grace. And you're listening to our dad and your host of the Vacation Rental Revolution podcast.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Vacation Rental Revolution podcast. I'm your host, Shawn Moore, and we're back with our Experts Corner segments of these episodes or of this podcast. Every Friday, we bring in experts from the industry, and today we've got Mr. Derek Gisriel from Level Up Property Management joining us. We're going to talk all about property management, doubling our revenue with our short-term rentals, understanding revenue management, understanding what it takes to operate at the top of these markets, and we've got the guy to jump into that conversation with today. So Derek, I appreciate you joining me, man.
Thank you. It is great to be here and great to be with everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's, I always like to start with the backstory. You know, what got you into short-term rentals? How long have we been doing it? And then we'll dive into kind of what you guys are doing at Level Up Property Management, helping owners and guests maximize their revenue with their properties. And we'll dive into kind of specific tactics at that stage. But let's start with the backstory. What got you interested in this stuff in the first place?
Well, we always knew we wanted to be in real estate. The question really became as what avenue do you go? Like what strategy? I mean, as you know, you could do mobile home parks, commercial, residential, long-term, short-term, storage units. And the reason that we decided short-term rentals for two reasons. Number one, the design aspect that interested us, the improvement of the property and delivering like a phenomenal guest experience. But the practical reason was tax purposes. So we, like many people, had a W-2 job. Lauren and I were both in sales, and our company was involved in acquisition. And through that acquisition, created a tremendous amount of tax liability. And we executed on a short-term rental loophole strategy, which I won't get in too deep today, but it allowed us to basically cost segregate, depreciate the house in the first year that it's alive. And we ended up saving about $200,000 in taxes that we were going to write the IRS a check. We still wrote them a check, but for significantly less. And that's how we first got in a 5-bedroom house in a very old school community, like vacation rental market, where you have the summer rates, winter rates, holiday rates, and design was probably 10, 15 years out of date. Did a 49-day renovation on that property and took the income from $64,000 in its best year. And last year we closed the books at $190,000. So we learned a lot during the way and during the process, which we've documented. And we had owners coming to us and saying, hey, I don't care to manage my property, or you guys are doing a great job. Can you help us? And that was the birth of Level Up.
Yeah, awesome. And I love that story and very familiar with the short-term rental loophole. Like you said, we won't dive into that. Those of you that are listening, if you're not familiar with that, go to some of the past episodes. You can just search Uncle Sam or taxes, and you'll find many conversations with CPAs that we've had those conversations with. But I've done the same thing, and it can be a significant savings on the taxes where you're either writing a check to Uncle Sam or you do this and you end up putting it back toward the portfolio. And it's always interesting to me when I find and talk to the backstory of people that are diving into this game or any game. I talk to people outside the short-term rental business and business owners in general on a regular basis, and how many people get into the business that they're actually in almost by accident, right? They did it. They were doing it themselves. They were doing it for a certain reason. And because they had success, people are saying, hey, can you help me with that? That's how we ended up starting Vodacy. I mean, I've been a full-time investor for 24 years, and I just had a lot of people come in saying, hey, can you show me how to do this? Can you teach me how to do this? Can you help me with this? It looks like you're having success here. Can you show me this process? And you start documenting and helping. And it sounds like that's how Level Up Property Management started. So you started helping other owners, it sounds like, in the area that you were in, starting to say, hey, listen, they saw what you guys were doing. They saw that you took an underperformer or a property that was, I never really like to tag properties as underperformers. I say that they perform exactly how they're set up to perform, but there's properties that have a lot more potential to perform better, right? And you guys saw that and were able to do that. Other people saw that from the outside looking in. And then you said, okay, well, maybe there's something here. And so obviously that probably wasn't just like one conversation that you just decided to cut bait and start this property management business up. Maybe it was. Talk to me about the decision to say, hey, listen, we're gonna say goodbye to those W-2 paychecks and run down a different road.
Yeah, it's certainly a somewhat scary decision, especially we have two kids. One now is my son is 6 and my daughter's 3. So at the time, this was 2.5, 3 years ago. And I remember it was actually this month, about 3 years ago. And it was, semi-scary decision. We just had the one house at the time. It was pacing really well. We knew we had something that we could build upon. Fast forward to today, we're closing on our 4th property that we own, in addition to, of course, our management clients.
And I'm curious on your thoughts about this. I'm a big believer that the saturated markets are a very, very good indicator of demand. And a lot of people run away from saturated markets. And it seems like from your standpoint, from your seat, you semi must agree with that because you went and opened up in a very saturated market because you obviously understand, well, at least what I do is that there's a lot of demand there and there's a lot of people spending money there, right?
Yes. And look, I mean, in that area, you have 70 million people traveling there every single year. So we know for sure, like the demand's there. That's definitely not a question. And we know that there's a lot of people performing in the top 10%, 5%, 1% of the market. Success leaves clues. We can look at those listings and it should be no surprise as to why they're successful.
Right.
And then you could flip to page 67 or 100 of Airbnb in that market, and you can take a look at those listings and you'll see very quickly why those houses are not successful. Either on the flip side, right? The complete opposite of page 1, 2, or 3 in that market.
Yeah, absolutely. And I couldn't agree more. We've got within our Odyssey family, we've got what we call the 1% club. And we have that because we have a lot of members that are operating in the top properties in multiple markets across the country. And we've got a couple people in the top market, top properties in different bedroom counts in the greater Orlando markets. And there's a reason why, right? And like you said, success leaves clues. And there's markets within the market. And you have to decide, where am I going to play? Am I going to play in the bottom of the market, the middle of the market, or the top of the market? The bottom of the market is really, really obvious. It's really crappy properties. They don't care. They're hosts that just don't, they're there for a reason, right? The top of the market is very, very obvious because they're also very intentional about doing what they need to do to level up and raise the bar, right? And be able to say, hey, listen, I'm gonna operate toward the top of this market. The middle of the market is where people get lost. It's kind of that dead man zone, right? And so they're nice properties. They're set up like model homes. They look like a beautiful home that you would sell on Zillow a lot of times, but there's nothing else to them. And so they end up stuck and people wonder, well, why? And that's the biggest portion of the market, is that middle of the market, right? And so what the goal is to raise the bar and raise toward the top of the market. So let's talk about some of those things that you guys see as strategies to do that.
Yeah, look, I mean, if you take a look, love or hate hotels, the one thing that they are is they're consistent, right? And that's the thing that you've got to get right first. And if you see where Airbnb is shifting, it's more to the experiential, like design, the amenities. You're curating an actual experience for your guests, your potential guests that you're going to be hosting. And that simultaneously allows your property to stand out against competitors and allows the cream to rise to the top.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the big difference right there is going backwards. We always say we're in the experience business, not in the property business. And the big mistake the middle of the market makes is they think they're in the property business. They think if they buy a really nice property and furnish it like a model home and set it up like it looks like it should be on Zillow, you're trying to sell a property. Well, we're not in the property business. We're in the experience business. And we've got to be able to not only set up an amazing experience for a specific target audience. It's very, very difficult to curate an amazing experience for this wide range of audiences. but it's a lot easier to curate a great experience for a narrow base, a narrow audience, and say, hey, listen, I'm going after the adventure seekers. I'm going after the families. I'm going after the couples retreat. I'm going after the business traveler, whoever that audience is. Then go curate this amazing experience and then do a good job of setting up, delivering it, and articulating it in your marketing, right? And that's the difference between the middle of the market and the top of the market and where all the money's made in this business.
And look, like we call it the land of mediocrity, right? It's just like that. Like it's a nice house, but it's just a vanilla envelope and it has somewhat great potential, but it's just waiting for someone to take and execute on a plan. And first thing you've got to do is define like who's your guest avatar, like who are we actually targeting? To your point, is it families? Is it business travelers, adventure seekers? And these may be subsects of the market. But you're really honing in, like, for example, most of our homes that we have in our portfolio, whether it's our own houses that we own or our management clients, these are houses that cater to specifically to families, right? Yeah. So they're going to show up. They generally speaking, have kids, multiple kids. And, one of the properties that we closed on this past year in that same market that we started in, is we converted the garage into a full arcade in one of the houses, full basketball hoop, 120-inch projection screen. Yep. And then the other one was a 2-car garage. In that market, garages make absolutely no sense. They're not adding any value. So that one we converted into a full movie theater. Our thought behind that is when Lauren and I walk into a house and we're on vacation, we can go to the pool and we can relax and maybe the kids will join us. But a lot of the times they'll just head to the arcade or to the movie theater. And it's like, okay, your vacation has begun.
Right. And that's where I always tell people too, don't overthink your target audience, right? There's like you mentioned, like your portfolio, you guys are a young family. You've got kids. You understand that target audience. You should be part of the target audience. It's way easier to set up an amazing experience for a specific target audience if you are part of that audience, right? I have one property, like we travel as families. So I have properties that will be set up as families because you will understand different markets, right? Based on your hobbies, based on your traveler preferences, based on all those different things. I also have a hobby of fly fishing. So I had one of my properties that was set up geared toward fly fishermen because I really understood that group. I go on multiple fishing trips and I know the nuances of, traveling with fly rods and rod holders and wader drying stations and drift boat carrier, like all these different things that you have to think about when you're going on a fly fishing trip that you don't necessarily want to travel with, right? And so we would set these properties up to have everything that they needed so they didn't have to travel with it. And they would pay us a premium for that because we set it up for that. But I understood that audience, right? If I tried to set up a property for surfers and I don't know how to surf and you know how to surf, right? I know I saw that one of your hobbies is surfing, right? And so you're going to kill me in the market if I'm just trying to go after an opportunity towards surfers, if I'm trying to set up a property against another surfer, for example. And so don't overthink your target audience. Be part of that target audience, and they will be subsects of the travelers that are going to that specific location, and they will pay a premium because you're speaking directly to them. And I think that it's one of the biggest misconceptions on raising your revenue, maximizing your potential is people think, well, if I only go after this small group, then all these other people are not going to want my property. And that's absolutely true. Part of marketing is getting people to say no to what you have. But the other part of marketing is those people that you are speaking to, you're speaking directly to them. They feel like you took a page right out of their diary. You know exactly what they want and they're willing to pay a premium for it. And that's how you maximize the revenue.
And the other thing I'll add to that, Shawn, is like it also helps when you go in the design phase. When you're designing the home, you've already defined like who your target audience is. It makes the decisions a lot easier because like now when we're designing the flow of the home and like when my family walks in the door, what will be their next steps? Like where will they check out first? Where is their eye drawn to? And you have certain, areas such as like around a cowboy hanging, fire pit that's outside for gathering. You have an outdoor dining table. You have the cabanas by the pool. You've curated not just an experience, but also like where people can gather, or the opposite, they could disperse and they can have their own space.
Yeah, absolutely. And both are important, right? They're both, like you mentioned, sometimes you go in and, we go in and the kids go to one spot and, mom and dad are hanging out and enjoying another spot, and they kind of disperse, but everybody's having a great time. And then there's other places where we all gather together and have a great time together, and having both of it. And when you understand the target audience, like you said, it makes design easy. It also goes to the next step. And let's talk about that, is being able to, now you've identified a target audience. You identified how you're going to set this property up with designing this experience. Now you've got to deliver it, which is ultimately what you guys come in and help do, is on the property management side, is making sure that experience gets delivered to the guest the same way every single time, right? I always challenge investors that I talk to that when you're talking to property managers, their job is not to, identify your target audience, get the property set up for you. Their job is to take everything you've curated and do an amazing job, better than you could, at delivering this to your guests every single time.
Yeah, it's the replication over and over, right?
Yeah.
And, for example, last year we closed the books. We hosted over 6,600 guests. We achieved a 99.6% 5-star rating. And the reason for that is the consistency to the process. I'll also add, it's like a personalized welcome. When you walk into a place, you got one shot, right? And
Right.
you have all the senses you're going to hit. You have your visual. What does it even smell like, right? And there's a reason that high-end hotels use scent diffuser systems, like for example, in their hotel lobby, because they're curating an actual experience. And that scent is a very powerful tool to, ingrain core memories, of your property.
Yeah. Like we have scent diffusers in every single one of our properties. And I'm talking about the scent diffusers in the HVAC system, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the cold air scent diffusers connects to the HVAC system. I'm curious, like it sounds like you guys are a fan of that as well. We just took that piece from, stole it from the hotel industry. We know that they do it. We know it works. We know that it's part of that experience, and we do it on every single one of our properties.
And it's one of the things like guests will actually comment on, they may, hey, the bed was amazing, or the couch was amazing. Where do you guys buy that at? But one of the things that's continuously brought up is personalized welcome. So we'll do a personalized welcome screen, much like a Hilton, Ritz-Carlton, Marriott, custom with their name, a handwritten note from Lauren and myself. We use a service called Handwritten. We're not writing thousands of handwritten cards, but that's something that's left out for the guest. And then you add that in with the scent. And look, as you know, inevitably we're in hospitality. Things will go wrong. You'll have issues with your HVAC, with the pool heater, and certain things. But if you're going in and you're making an incredible first impression, what we find is people, are generally fairly forgiving when things do go wrong, as long as you're responsive and you take care of them.
Yeah, 100%. You buy yourself so much grace and forgiveness when you do a great job on the front end. The guest feels it. They understand the communications there. People are very understanding that things do go wrong in properties, right? HVACs are going to go out. Fridges are going to break. Whatever happens, the hot tub's not going to heat. And those things happen. The guests are very, very forgiving when they know that you're doing an amazing job, everything you can to make sure that they've got a great experience. You're very attentive. You actually care about the problem when there is a problem. They need to feel that, hey, listen, this is important to you as it is to us to get fixed. And then all of a sudden, it's amazing that sometimes those are our best reviews, is how we handle those problems. And there's some of our, the customers that are willing to come back and be repeat guests because they saw, we always say, hey, listen, you really judge somebody's character by what they do when things aren't going right, not when things are going right. And that's, the guest judges us as hosts, as managers, as if when things go wrong, that's their best way to judge how we're going to handle it.
Yeah. I mean, look, you said it, like you have the potential through every single reservation to win the guest for life through your whole portfolio. They may stay in Concan, Texas on one time, and then next year they're taking the kids to Disney World, but they're going to stay within a Level Up home because of maybe there was something that happened that we fixed, or maybe everything just went great and it had the consistency that they're looking for.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. And so once we get that to that stage where it's the, amazing communication. I've always, dealing with different reviews that come in, and I actually had a coaching call yesterday and somebody brought up and said, man, they rank us on these 5 different things. And on one of my really expensive weekends, I've always gotten 5-star reviews. I still got a 5-star review, but they ranked me a 4 on value. And it was on one of the times where I was, our weekends, it was a holiday weekend and we were charging double what we normally charge. That's what the market was doing. And I got a 4 on value, and it really bothered him. He said, what can I do? And they were saying, should I add different amenities? Should I do something else? And my answer to this, and I'm curious what your answer may be, if it's different at all, as well. Like, don't be afraid to disagree with me here.
Mm-hmm.
My answer was that it comes down to the communication. It comes down to making them feel really more important than ever. I said, when you stay at, Four Seasons, a Waldorf, a Ritz, a Montage, some of those high-end resorts and those high-end hospitality brands, when you go in, the minute you walk in, they know your name, and everybody knows your name. The person taking your keys at valet, the person that you're checking in with, the person that's showing you to your room. You walk back in from the day at the end of a day in the lobby, and somebody's going to ask you, hey, Mr. or Mrs. Moore, how was your day? Is there anything we can do for you? And it's just a different level of communication. And I said, if you're losing out on value and you're getting a knock on value, I believe it comes down to the way you're communicating with the guest. And it's the easiest way to do, the cheapest way, but probably the most effective way to get that guest to think, man, I really feel valued because they're actually here for me. They're communicating with me. They're reaching out, making sure my stay is done. Everything's up to par. Are there other things that if you had that question, is there anything that would come to mind for you on that?
Yeah, this brings to light a story that I'll share with you real quick. So Lauren and I were staying at a Ritz-Carlton in Cancun. They've now changed it, a different Ritz. It's under a different brand now. Mm-hmm. But we rented a vehicle because we were traveling from Tulum to Cancun, and we pulled up to the Ritz-Carlton. And the valet, this is before we have checked in. The valet knew our names as they opened our doors, which for us was like somewhat a little bit like, crazy, because it's like, I still to this day, Lauren and I don't know, how that they knew that, out of this huge hotel that it was us actually driving up. Whether that was like their pre-homework of like searching our names online and seeing who, what we looked like. I don't know, but that still to this day is a lasting impression. And it is something that can take, we can take definitely notes on. And the second thing that I'll say is when it comes to value, it's probably not the price. It's probably not because like they obviously paid the price for that. It, to your point, was probably something else that could have been hit on. But one thing that we can do as host is we can dig in and we can ask them, hey, this is very important. I want to improve. By the way, like, what can we do to improve the value equation? Like, because, you left us a 4. And most of the time they'll tell you. And it's like, cool. And it could be something that maybe we don't need to pivot. But if that person is willing to tell you, there's probably 10 other people that have thought the same thing. They just didn't grade you.
100%. And I'm so glad you brought that point up, is just ask, right? The customer will most likely tell you, especially when they feel that you genuinely want to make it better, and they'll appreciate that, right? And they'll appreciate that you actually, that does matter to you and that you reached out and asked them, and they'll tell you. And like you said, the person who says something is usually, a tenth of the people who have thought about it. So it's going to behoove you as a host to make sure you get the answers to that, to fix it if you need to raise the bar somewhere.
Definitely.
And so awesome, Derek. Well, listen, this has been a really good conversation. What, when you look at a property, what are the number, like if I had to say, hey, listen, you got Level Up Property Management. I'm an owner of a property and I'm considering changing. And, I saw your book online. It says double your short-term rental income, and you guys know how to do that. Like, what are the 1 or 2 things you guys are looking for to make sure that the property has what you guys are looking for to actually be able to do that and deliver what you're promising?
Look, if we've got a house, if we have a client that comes to us and, they do have the vanilla envelope or the cookie cutter type house and they're not performing too well, that makes sense, right? we can take a look and we can see like possibly
Pretty
why
easy.
they're not
It's pretty obvious. Yeah.
hit in their numbers.
Yeah.
On Lauren's standpoint, she does interior design. So, I'm kind of that's her wheelhouse and she's amazing at that. And she's designed all of our houses as well as some of our clients. And that's just included with our services as part of our clients. And then, my wheelhouse is more of the marketing aspect, the OTAs, the optimization, and more importantly, the revenue management, ebbing and flowing with the market, taking a look at comp sets. But when you combine great design with experience, as we talked about, and the correct and proper pricing, that house that we purchased, our first home in the summer, they were doing maximum. They were saying, okay, it's worth 900, and they would get booked out in the summer. But with dynamic pricing, we started pushing it higher and higher and higher. This year we've broken a record. We booked a night over $1,900 a night.
Yeah.
In a house that it was originally capped at 900. And that may have been the value, to be fair.
Yeah.
Like that house probably was delivering the value of around $800 to $900 house. But if you go ahead and you increase the design, you increase the experiences, therefore you're increasing, your pricing, you can justify that, then that's really when everything comes together, because you're not just sitting empty in the winter, but you're also breaking records in the peak times.
Yeah. And that's where it's critical, is saying, okay, I need to make as much money during those peak times when people are willing to pay the premiums, right? And then ultimately fill some of the gaps in the slower times. And I think that a lot of times people price too high during the slow periods and they price too low during the peak periods. And they don't understand that dynamic. And everybody, like, we're in a day and age where, when I started this in 2006, there was no such thing as price labs. There was no such thing as Airbnb, right? We were trying to figure this out on classified sections. And so, and then you got dynamic pricing tools, and a few people started using them, and they were really starting to really, get their unfair share of business. Well, everybody pretty much uses dynamic pricing now. So now it's a matter of understanding how to navigate with those tools and understand when to push, when to pull, and understand like how to maximize that revenue. But I like what you said at first. At first, it's really looking at the property and saying, hey, listen, if it's just a cookie cutter home, it starts with design, it starts with the experience. And if but there's times where properties are really set up nice and they're still leaving a lot of money on the table because they don't understand the pricing aspect of it on the back end. Pricing is one of your biggest marketing tools, but it's also obviously a huge revenue management tool on knowing when to push, when to pull, when to stay steady. And it's a constant battle, right? It's not a set it and forget it, especially nowadays. You can't just set it and forget it and think that it's going to work, maximize your revenue.
Yeah, we're kind of heading out of the slow season, obviously into March, and a lot of our properties are highly seasonal at the beach, or, Kissimmee area is fairly, steady
Constant,
throughout the year. But, when we're in the slow season, it does a house no good. A house in my opinion, shouldn't sit empty, but it also does two things. Like, yes, you are going to take a slightly lower rate than possibly what you're used to, but the algorithm sees that. And in my opinion, if you were to leave a house, you keep your rates artificially high and you're not ebbing and flowing with the market, you're doing two things. Number one, you're slowing the velocity of 5-star reviews, which will then slow down headed into the busy season, where Airbnb is recognizing and the other OTAs are recognizing that you have high velocity. So they're going to reward that behavior. And, the second thing is really taking a look at, coupling the 5-star reviews, but it takes a look to the OTAs and they say, how do we make our money? We make our money when houses get booked. Mm-hmm. And you know what? Derek's house is getting booked and we're making money. So therefore we will reward Derek's house in the busy season and in the slow season, and we'll rank it appropriately.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the biggest thing people don't recognize is the number one thing on the algorithm, period. It doesn't you can do it almost in real time and show somebody what happens to your rankings when you get a booking and you get another booking. Immediately you climb instantly. And you can almost literally watch it on RankBreeze in real time on the rankings, because that's how they make money. And they're saying, just like you said, if Derek's house is getting booked and Shawn's isn't, I'm going to reward Derek and I'm going to continue to put him up. Well, by giving him better rankings, Derek's house continues to get booked more, and you get that velocity. And it's number one is if your house gets booked, that's what they're looking at. Number two is reviews. And those are the two most weighted, like not even close to anything else as far as the algorithm is. How much money are they making? How many bookings are you getting? And then how many reviews you're getting, because they want you to have 5-star reviews. They want their customers to have an amazing experience. The last thing that they want is to deal with customer service issues, right? They don't want people that are calling them up and saying, hey, I didn't think the value was there. I didn't like the location description. I didn't like this, or I didn't like that. So they are also going to make sure that even though you're making money for them, they need to make sure that you're one of those hosts that are not problem hosts, right? And they want to make sure you've got those 5-star reviews because they don't want to deal with it.
Yeah. And look, there's just a news article I read the other day about Airbnb doing QC, slashing thousands and thousands of properties, removing them off the platform because, they're actually making more money because it's just costing them so much time and effort. I think another thing is people that own houses or hosts or even other property management companies, they underestimate the detrimental effect of less than a 5-star. Yes. Because if you get a 4-star, if you get a 3-star, and things happen, and sometimes that will happen, right? I mean, it does certainly happen, but it's detrimental. Like you will fall very far, very fast. And there's a study showing the impact of a 4 or 3-star rating on your average daily rate. Like you take the hit in the pocket. So we got to do everything that we can to deliver a great guest experience.
Absolutely. Love it. And ultimately, that's why I always partner with the best property managers. I love dealing with, professionals like yourself on my properties. I don't manage my own properties. I deal with the pros that are really, really understand how to deliver that, how to have that consistency on every single guest that comes in every single time. They understand that game, and we hand our properties over after we spend a lot of money on them and set them up correctly. And then we partner with people like you guys to say, hey, listen, we're going to help you deliver this experience. And so, Derek, where can people get pointed? Like I always, at the end of these episodes and these conversations, it's been an amazing conversation. I know there's a lot more that people would probably love to hear about what you guys are doing, and cover the markets that you guys cover on the property management, and then how they can get more of you on social, on your website, and all those different great places.
Sure. So we're all over Texas, and we are all over Florida. So two kind of multiple markets within each state, but 2 major states that we're currently in, looking at expanding also possibly into a ski area of Vermont. So that's kind of to be determined, but our website is staylevelup.com. We have a YouTube channel, Level Up Stays, where we detail all of our tips, tricks, stats, like everything we do on a day-to-day basis. We help, teach that on our YouTube channel.
Awesome. Love it. And we'll post all of those links, you guys, in the show notes. You know that if you're an avid listener of this podcast, you know that all those links are always in the show notes of all these episodes. So we'll make sure that we post that. So Derek, this has been an awesome conversation, man. I really, really appreciate it. I appreciate you coming on, sharing that knowledge. Go check out the YouTube channel, you guys. I've also looked at it, and Derek does a really good job of sharing a lot of tips on there, just to go in and say, hey, listen, what are some of the things I can do to level up, and what can I do to maximize my revenue? And so appreciate you, Derek. You guys that are listening, we know how valuable your time is. We very much appreciate you spending it with us. And at the end of these episodes, I always ask you, if you have more than 30 seconds, like it or review it on whatever platform you're watching or listening on. Those things help us. If you know somebody else who would like to be a part of these conversations, share the show. We don't run ads or sponsorships on these shows for a reason, and we want you guys to share it organically and invite people that you think would love to be a part of these types of conversations. And then the final, most important thing I ask you at the end of all these episodes, pick that one thing you can do today to start building that life you don't want to take vacation from. Cheers, my friends.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Vacation Rental Revolution podcast. Share this with other people you think need to hear about it. And don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review. Hey Grace, is there a website? Yes! For more amazing content and expert advice, visit Vodacy.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.